This is the Leadership in Insurance podcast, brought to you by FinPro Search Partners.
Insurance companies are businesses and they need to look for the long term and be sustainable.
We went from 0 to 1 and now it's going from 1 to 100.
Insurance as a concept, as a kind of service, is brilliant. The execution is what we're looking at now.
I think the companies that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to understand and master the art of intent.
When we talk about innovation, we lean too heavily to think about technology and we don't think about creating a culture of innovation.
I think innovation is essentially continuous improvement of existing processes and platforms and product.
Right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be seamless.
Hello and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bonds, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Michael, who is President of Applied Systems Carrier Business. I nearly messed that up, Michael, but I think I got there. What we say? Do we need to re-record or are we good for that?
We're good. That's good.
Michael, thanks for joining us. We had the pleasure of meeting last week. But everyone's going to know Applied out there in the big, wider insurance world. But let's tell everyone who you are and obviously what you do for Applied.
Sounds good. And thank you for having me. So my name is Michael Streit. I joined Applied 3 years ago to lead EasyLinks, which is one of Applied's 2 agency management systems. Most folks know Applied for our management systems, EasyLinks, which is the leading AMS for Main Street agencies, and Epic, which is the by far and away leading management system for more enterprise agencies and brokers. The other piece of the Applied business is our carrier portfolio, which you mentioned, in which I took a leadership role in last fall. And that includes our Ivans portfolio. Ivans is known for Download, which is the connectivity that keeps policy admin systems and agency management systems in sync. There's a variety of other products in the portfolio, data products and other submissions products. And then we acquired Cytora last fall as well, which rounds out our carrier business portfolio.
Busy man, busy job. What's the purpose behind your kind of new role? What are you going to be driving? Because you've obviously had a lot of success there. What initiatives are you going to be getting involved with, this year and beyond?
So the way I think of it is Applied has spent 43 years. Applied was founded in 1983. Driving efficiency for agencies and brokers. And we've done a pretty good job of that across the board. And the market position of our leading AMS solutions, I think, is a testament to that. Ivans, which was also coincidentally founded in 1983, so is also 43 years old, has been the connectivity layer for P&C insurance for 4 decades as well. And I'd say it's done a pretty good job of driving connectivity throughout the industry. There are areas, though, in the broad P&C ecosystem where friction still persists. And probably the most notable of these is the writing commercial risk. Commercial risk is just bespoke. Carriers all have their own perspectives on what risk factors matter. And so there's been a lot of friction left in the system. And we think our job is to remove friction from this ecosystem, and so we acquired Cytora to help us do that. And I can get into more about kind of why Cytora and how it all fits as we go on. But that's my biggest initiative is figuring out how we remove friction from that process with our suite of tools. Yeah,
I want to talk about the strategic thinking behind buying Cytora, but before I get to that, one of the things I wanted to touch on is that just this sort of like cultural piece, we mentioned it's easy to sit here and list off the Ivans portfolio, the Applied portfolio. How do you think you maintain that innovative edge in a business of that size and scale that's that old? Because it's funny when we talk about insurtech, 1.0, 2.0, and you think, well, yeah, this is a 43-year-old company that fits very much within insurtech. But how do you think they maintain that culture of innovation, or can it only happen through acquisition?
That's a great question. Look, I think our durability in this industry is our biggest asset. There is so much institutional knowledge inside the walls of Applied. And so, frankly, we feel like we have the best finger on the pulse of what the industry needs, be it brokers, carriers, agency owners, or CSRs and producers. And so I think that, access to the people that are living these workflows every day is frankly our biggest edge. And we have a lot of examples of innovation that have been homegrown and spun up through the Applied portfolio. We launched a business a few years ago called Applied Pay, which is payments processing for the insurance industry. That was entirely homegrown, and I think is one really good example. But the other way, as you said, is we are a highly acquisitive organization. And when somebody else is solving a workflow better than ours, or better than we are, and do it in such a way that we think complements the other problems we're trying to solve, we're not shy about that. When we do that, I would say we're always looking for really great cultural fits with the Applied ethos. That was one of the things that was most attractive about the Cytora crew in particular. But I think it's a little bit of both.
Mm. Yeah, and it makes sense to me. I mean, I'm always intrigued about innovation at scale because I think, this podcast specifically, and even our clients, we're a search firm that works with startups and scale ups. A lot of the time, our clients are anywhere between like Series A, some Series D clients is a bit different, but there's some pretty early stage businesses, and I think it's very easy to be flippant about innovation because it's easy to innovate when you're so small. The challenge is innovating at scale and then making that effective. So, but let's talk about that acquisition then. What was the strategic rationale behind acquiring Cytora?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we felt like the fact that friction still exists in the commercial submission process was a problem, and it's not like it's something that folks haven't tried to solve.
Yeah.
I think the issue is the solutions that have come to life have been either very point to point. So maybe you have one broker who establishes connectivity with one carrier, and then when that carrier wants to expand it to another broker, they got to rebuild it. Or submission comes into one part of the carrier and turns out it needs to be served by a different, business unit within the carrier. You got to rebuild those connections. So the first problem is they're very point to point. The second problem, which is very relevant to Cytora, is the solutions that exist tend to be very standardized. So prior to the advent of LLMs, if you wanted to drive automation, you needed to standardize the data that was flowing around, or else it would have been an impossible task to drive automation. Obviously, LLMs change that. So now you can digitize unstructured data and achieve all the benefits of automation without sacrificing what we refer to as a carrier's unique view of risk. And so quite simply, we bought Cytora to bring this vision we have to life of a fully connected commercial submissions process. The Cytora tool is, it's an incredible standalone piece of technology. It effectively takes unstructured data, any sort of insurance data from any document, it digitizes it. So in the submissions use case, what that means is that the underwriting organization is not spending their time entering data into a system or shipping the data overseas to a business process outsourcer that's going to, do that. So it happens automatically, which frees up more time to actually evaluate the risk. It also does so in a way that, as I mentioned, preserves the unique view of risk. So Cytora is what's called schema-driven, which means unlike previous iterations of artificial intelligence technology, they don't take the source and say, here's what all these fields mean. Instead, it starts with the end in mind. It says, here's the 30 fields that I need to evaluate a risk of this type. Then Cytora can identify what documents coming in, pull out the relevant information, and move it on to downstream systems to power further automation. And then our vision, of course, is to then pull that, what we call left, back into the agency management workflow and connect that full round trip of insurance.
Yeah, there was a part of our prior conversation. I think the word connectivity. If we had buzzword bingo, we would have been we would have been pinging off the charts with that. What's the full vision for that then? What does effective agency connectivity mean for carriers really? Because I think everyone looks at this in silos, what it means for them, their systems. But what does it mean when you kind of look at connectivity for carriers?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to argue with the notion that risk will consolidate with carriers who make it easiest to place risk. That's a pretty hard to debate comment. And so carriers are always seeking ways to make it easier for brokers to work with them. So for me, I think there's a couple pieces of that. One is just being front of mind, the extent to which carriers can embed themselves directly into agencies' workflows means that you'll get, a look at more risk. If you can clearly communicate your appetite, what you need from the broker or the agent, that makes it, more painless. And then finally, if you can just, number one, get to a quote faster, and then number two, put that quote back in the agency's workflow faster, you'll win more risk as well. So that's, to me, what effective connectivity looks like. It's kind of melding the two workflows into one. And that's, like I said, what we're hoping to build.
What do you think that means culturally for the industry? Because I think that's the thing. Obviously, I'm sitting here in London. Relationships drive most of the business in the insurance industry. Of course, availability, risk. Of course, ease of use. Do we think we're going to see a shift there in culture and how the business maybe interacts with each other, or is that going to allow new competitors to kind of compete on a more even playing field? Yeah, what do you see as kind of the future state there? Because it's clearly going to shift something in the dynamic of how we go about our business and how we interact as a community.
Yeah, I guess I don't feel that the importance of, number one, good agency relationships changes.
No.
Agents are still the ones that own the relationships with the insured, and so that process, or that relationship is never going away from my perspective. From my perspective, it's all about taking the tasks in the underwriting workflow that don't add value. So transcribing data, following up with someone to say you forgot this piece of information, checking your email inbox, simple stuff like that, and realizing you missed a follow-up from an underwriter, taking that out of the workflow so that carriers, brokers can spend more of their time building the relationships, assessing their view of risk, thinking about how their portfolio is constructed. To me, it's all additive to that. And to your point around, does this democratize the industry in any way? I mean, certainly my hope would be so. My hope would be that we believe there's over $1 trillion in coverage gap, and that is not because of a lack of desire or capacity or financing to insure. It's because there's so much friction in the system that it's a pain in the neck to place risk. And so we feel like if we can remove the friction, there's going to be more coverage, and it's a noble mission in that sense.
Yeah. What's the sort of market readiness for this? Can you obviously, so Applied's been around forever, Cytora's been around for a while actually as well. And is this are you pushing into an open door? Is there still an education piece here? Or, I can't make your job sound too easy, otherwise they'll try and give you a pay cut. But let's
Yeah, it's good. I'd say it varies, of course. And I think it depends on the maturity of the parties involved. So we see some leading carriers pushing us in terms of how fast we innovate, and same thing on the broker side. One of the things we try to be really thoughtful about is building our solutions on both sides of the house, broker and carrier, in a way that you can mature into effective usage. And so we would hate for a client to feel like they're so behind they can't get started, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if a carrier or a broker, is sophisticated enough to take advantage of the opportunity, we want to be the ones to help power it.
Yeah. I think you brought up a really important point. I think that's where I see some resistance, is that people feel they're so far away from the the competition that are pushing the front and the boundaries on technology, that almost there's a sort of apathy around starting. And yeah, I wondered if that's something that exists, but clearly it does. Has the conversation changed in the time that you've been with the business around things like, genuine digitization, right? There's lots of different ways to think about it. But what about things like agentic orchestration? That's a sentence I wouldn't say 3 years ago, right? We wouldn't be having this conversation. Has that come up in conversation? Is the level of sophistication of the conversation you have with potential clients improved or got more complex?
No doubt, 100% true. I remember. So the OpenAI ChatGPT public release happened like 6 weeks after I started at Applied. So I was running EasyLinks at the time.
Right.
And our first instinct was, well, we got to use the generative capabilities of this to help with marketing content. And
Mhm.
that was an awesome tool, great adoption, but it's totally different in 3 years what these technologies are capable of. I think from my standpoint, and this will go back to my maturity curve comment. I think the what the industry, I would say, is used to today is what I'll call kind of basic digitization. Think like one unstructured email comes in, I can digitize it. That in and of itself is a step change innovation from 3, 4, 5 years ago. But that to us is kind of foundational level. And then we think of 3 layers on top of that. So the first is digitize an entire risk. So going from digitizing one email or one document and identifying the fields on the PDF, turning them into data, that's one thing. But to be able to get multiple communications across multiple points in time and create a consolidated, we use the word stateful view of risk, that is a step change improvement, which Cytora is now capable of. So again, phase, call it 0, is digitize a communication. Phase 1 is digitize an entire risk. And like simple use cases like this would be, you send a submission, you're missing the vehicle schedule. That happens all the time. And then the communication goes back to the broker, says, send me the vehicle schedule. It comes 3 weeks later. Previous tools would not have been able to recognize that those two were part of the same and update the view of risk into the downstream systems. So it's phase 1, it's still a pretty meaningful improvement. The second phase is my favorite buzzword, which is orchestration, because that can mean so many different things. To me, what that means is build a workflow that executes itself with humans in the loop. And so you can imagine a submission coming in. The next step in that submission is going to be, I'm going to check this against my appetite. So the way the tools have been built now and what Cytora is capable of doing is, submission comes in, I'm going to reference a separate appetite document. I'm going to then know whether it's in appetite or not. If it's not in appetite, I trigger an automatic email back to the broker, says this is not an appetite, thanks for the submission. Otherwise, I proceed throughout the process. So the second thing is orchestrating, I'll call it some or all of the underwriting or claims or whatever it may be workflow. And then the third level of maturation is full connectivity. So everything I've described so far starts and ends on the carrier side of that trade. But as I open this with, our vision is to connect that automation back into the agency so that you can do things like identify documents sitting in the agency management system of your trading partners, pull the data out of that, get access to the risk fields required so that you can signal appetite directly in the carrier's workflow, so that you can drop a quote directly in the carrier's workflow. And so that as our agency management system teammates build out agentic workflows on that side, these agentic workflows can interact with each other. So to me, that's kind of the phases of maturation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting to see, and we're already starting to see a lot of it happen. And yeah, it goes back to this thing of like the secret sources, your appetite for risk, your view on risk as a carrier. It's like, what's in appetite and what's not. And then we're now getting into this kind of world where, we can screen most of that out. I always get into this because we're a talent business, we always get into this conversation about, I worry about the training and development of new entrants into the industry. I don't think it's not possible. I just think we're all a bit asleep at the wheel. And I think for every dollar we spend on kind of like digitization, there should be at least a reciprocal dollar probably going towards training and development. How are we going to train people when, a lot of the kind of grunt work of insurance won't need to be done. It will be done automatically and digitally. And then that means we need higher value individuals within the businesses. But that's a future problem that we're not trying to solve now. But that's always my kind of thing that I think about. Because we've got time, I wanted to talk to you about, this term like intrapreneurial, because you run business divisions and you drive growth inside these like large organizations. What did you pick up from your time running EasyLinks that you're now like moving into this broader role that you're in now? We love to hear when you got something wrong as well, because that's how you learn anything as well. So yeah, what would you pick up and take with you?
From the time running EasyLinks to the
Yeah,
carrier.
to the new role. Yeah.
Yeah, and, I think first of all, EasyLinks was where I learned the insurance industry. So I did not come from insurance. So I learned insurance when I showed up at Applied to run EasyLinks.
Sure.
The EasyLinks customer is typically an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
They're typically or often multi-generational Main Street insurance agents who are super connected to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so from them, I learned from the customers themselves. I learned just how important the independent agent channel is to this entire ecosystem. When I joined, it was a few years after I'll call it the peak of the, previous insurtech wave, where lots of customers or lots of companies were trying to sell insurance on the internet, cut out the broker. And what I think we all realized as the independent broker channel persisted was just how important that group is. And it's important for a couple of reasons. One is they have the trust with the community. I don't know where you bought your homeowner's insurance, but I bought it from an agent. It's an important purchase. And so they have access to, to the insureds. The second thing is, if you think about the type of individual who's going to trust who's going to trust a broker to place their risk versus the type of individual that's going to shop for new policy every year. If you're a carrier, who would you rather have? Obviously, you'd rather have someone who a trusted partner has kind of vetted, understood that they fit with the carrier's view of risk, and then done the sale on behalf of the carrier to convince the insured that they're with the right carrier. That's a really important piece of the process if you think about how these carriers make their money. So that was the biggest thing I learned from EasyLinks, was honestly just how important the channel overall is. And it's fun now being on the other side of the trade and seeing seeing how the carriers view the brokers, which is similar. So these are integral parts of how we go to market, or distribution partners.
Yeah. The utmost good faith principle is the one you always come back to. Insurance 101. Which I remind my clients that when they're late paying. But no, Mike, I mean, I always like to. We're nearly at time, so I thought we'd do this. But you just come back from London. We just spoke about that a minute ago. What are you going to be getting up to this year? Will we see more acquisitions, more kind of just more growth? Where's your focus going to be on kind of like driving this part of the business?
My focus is bringing those three levels of maturation to life for our brokers and carriers. So over the next few months, we'll release improvements to our management systems themselves to take advantage of this connectivity that Cytora is able to provide. So my plan for the year is that at some point in this summer, we have hundreds of agencies on one side of the trade, carriers reaping the benefits of a frictionless experience, and that we're kind of continuing to learn and continue to identify friction points to take out of this process.
Amazing. I mean, I think it's really good to see the market driving towards this, but we need the big enough partners to make it happen. And I think the connectivity of all elements of the applied ecosystem is kind of realistically that's how we're gonna do it. It's all very good having point solutions, and I've invested in quite a few of them, and they're good on their own merits. But that kind of full digital stack we're going to see some really exciting businesses, I think, grown off the back of those ones, and maybe some of them we don't even know that exist today. So, Michael, I knew this would be a fun conversation. Thank you very much for being a guest on the Leadership in Insurance podcast.
Thank you for having me.